How to print make with plexiglass, drypoint method, intaglio printmaking tutorial, plus toproll application. So once you have 1/8 inch plexiglass, which you can get at Home Depot for cheap, you have to make sure you make a drawing that matches the size of it. I created a new line drawing with the dimensions of the plexiglass. I added value to my line drawing to give myself a reference for when I am going to be carving into the plexiglass, which you will see in a moment, but I gave myself the value reference to understand how deep I want the lines on the plexiglass to go and the pattern of the cross hatching that I would be doing. So this is the utensil for doing the carvings, and it's kind of scary because it's double edged. So when I'm going like this, I get scared I'm gonna like poke myself in the eye and like literally go blind. Like, that's so scary. So I'm gonna just put some of this putty. What is this? It feels like silly putty, but it's a kneaded eraser. I'm just gonna put that on one of the sides. I'm gonna make it into a little ball and put it right on top. All right, let's get to scratching. Drypoint is an engraving process under the intaglio category of printmaking. Intaglio is a printmaking process that involves making lines and textures into a plate matrix. The textures and lines are filled up with ink and the surface is wiped clean. The ink remains in the lines and textures. Drypoint is when you create the lines and textures in the plate directly with various tools. The quality of the line is unique. I am using a tool called an etching scribe, which can be found at any art supply store, for example, Blick, and I just placed the plexiglass on top of my drawing and began scribing the drawing into the plexiglass using this tracing method over top of my line drawing that I did. This is why keeping the drawing exactly in the frame of the plexiglass is useful, since carving into it freehand without tracing is a skill in and of itself. Much easier to just trace your drawing. Keep in mind how thick each line you're making is. The thicker the line, the more ink gets trapped inside and the darker it gets. I started by outlining the lines that I made in the original drawing, and then on the medium values I made a somewhat dense cross-hatching pattern, and then the lightest areas a very light touch spread apart cross-hatch. When carving into plexiglass, you can control the value through pressure and line density. A registration guide is a tool to help determine where the image will land on the printmaking paper. The guides consist of a piece of clear acetate, 3 to 5 millimeters, a material found at art stores or Home Depot, 2 layers of duct tape on one side, and Sharpie line drawings. Always draw your Sharpie guidelines on the bottom of your acetate. If the Sharpie is on the top, it will transfer to your print when printed. Turn your acetate over to the front. Put your printmaking paper up against the duct tape edge. Turn the acetate over without moving the piece of printmaking paper. Trace the perimeter of the paper with Sharpie. Next, position your clean plate where you would like to have it printed on your paper. Trace the perimeter of the plate with Sharpie on the back of the registration guide. This specific method is done to have control of where the image is printed on the paper. We use oil-based ink, not paint, in printmaking. Printmaking ink is a pigment suspended in various mediums formulated for the correct viscosity for printmaking. Printmaking ink is also found in art stores. I used black for my print, but you can use whatever color you want your lines to be. You want to make sure the ink is fluid and not stiff so that it can be spread across the plate with not too much force. I like to have mine as thick as brownie mix. Linseed oil can be used to break the ink up and make it more fluid. Apply the ink onto the surface of the plexiglass using a small rectangular piece of cardboard. The amount you want to do is mayonnaise on a BLT, not cream cheese on a bagel, because too much ink used is simply wasteful, as you're just going to have to wipe off all the excess with the following methods. The first is with tarlatan, stiff cheesecloth formed into a power puff used to wipe the surface of an intaglio plate clear of ink. Why are we wiping away the ink we just applied? Well, because the ink is in the carved out dry point lines and we are wiping the rest off of the surface to have a white background on the print. Simultaneously, it pushes the ink into the lines further. To make sure all of the ink comes off the surface, use phone book paper, which has a unique soft texture that picks up ink with ease, and also use tissue paper to get the last bits off. Make sure you wipe off the ink that gets on the sides of the plate and the back of the plate. Once all of this is done and the excess ink is all wiped down, we are ready to print. The printmaking paper needs to be damp before placing it into the printmaking press. The printmaking paper is also sold at any art supply store. Mine is 280 GSM. The printmaking press is a resource that can be found at local community colleges, and most cities have a public printmaking facility. I would just look up the public printmaking press in your city. I think there are a couple in Los Angeles. We then place the newsprint paper on the press, our inked up plexiglass onto the registration guide faced up, our damp printmaking paper on top within the lines on the registration guide as well, then another piece of newsprint over top of all of that, and then we place the printmaking press blankets over top of all of this and spin the wheel. When it comes out of the other side, you have your print. And here was my black and white final result. I titled her Attached. Another cool thing you can do with a dry point print is after your ink is in the lines and wiped down, you can mix colorful top roll ink with the transparent ink to make a transparent, colorful layer that is rolled over the top of the lines during the printing process. It is a layer of ink rolled over the surface of an intaglio plate after it has been inked and wiped. The layer of ink should have at least 50% transparent ink base cut into full strength ink from the can so as to not compete with the intaglio line image. I used a green mixing yellow and blue full strength ink from the can mixed with 50% transparent base to roll over top of my black lines, and this is what the result was. Black lines with a transparent green top roll. I love it and I love this process. Thank you for watching and I hope you learned something. See you next time.